Hello. I'd like to welcome folks to our second annual MAM Education webinar, Decolonizing the Museum. My name is Kay Grissom-Kiley, and I'm the Curator of Education at the Missoula Art Museum. Thank you so much for being here today. MAM is situated on the ancestral territories of the Salish and Pend Oreille peoples, and we respect the indigenous stewards of this land. We acknowledge their rich cultures as fundamental to artistic life in Montana and to the work of MAM. I'd like to introduce our educators today for this webinar. Sitting next to me is Jenny Bevill, MAM's educator and outreach specialist. And I'd also like to introduce Mike Jetty, the OPI, Office of Public Instruction's Indian Education Specialist. Mike is an enrolled member of the Spirit Lake Tribe, and he's been working in Indian education for over 28 years at the K-12 and university level. Please include any questions you might have during the webinar in the questions and answers section. Also, we have a digital evaluation that we invite you to access at the end of the webinar. And remember, if you are a teacher, there is one PIR credit for this webinar offered today. So we will be in touch with you about that at a later date. And you notice here on the screen, we have from our last training here at MAM in person, pre-COVID, Mike Jetty and Jenny did this training together, and they took pictures of themselves in the John Hitchcock installation, where you see Mike and Jenny posing with guitars.
Yeah, Mike and I always have fun when we do trainings together. So we just wanted to share that fun moment with you. So my name is Jenny, and you'll meet Mike in just a moment for real. I just wanted to give you a little bit of what the agenda is going to look like for this evening, and then just give you a little bit of context on the exhibition that we're sitting in. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see where Kay and I are. In the Frost Gallery at the Missoula Art Museum. Let's see. Do you all see us? I hope you do. I'm not sure how to do that. Okay. All right, great. So the first thing we'll do tonight is I'm going to give you a little bit of context about the Love Letters exhibition and the movement to decolonize museums and invite in a plurality of voices. Then Mike is going to teach us about Indian Education for All, which is a unique program in Montana. And Mike and I will spend some time discussing Split War Shield, which is the work behind Kay and me here in the Frost Gallery. It's work by Corwin Claremont. Mike is actually going to share his love letter to that artwork. And then we will invite all of you to share your own love letter, and we'll show you how to email it into our Teachable site for this exhibition. And as the finale of tonight, Mike will be acting as a selector for this exhibition, and will be sharing the artwork he chose to write a love letter to by Dwayne Wilcox, and we'll be hearing his letter. So if you have questions as we move through the webinar, please type them in. If you're watching on Facebook, we're monitoring those questions as well. And so to get started, and it'll all make a lot more sense in just a minute, Love Letters to the Collection is a year-long exhibition that opened in March of 2020, just before the pandemic forced MAM to temporarily close to the public. We're open now, following state and local guidelines, as you can see. And the exhibition features pieces from MAM's Contemporary American Indian Art Collection. All of the works in the exhibition are selected by guest curators, which include artists, writers, poets, tribal leaders, elected officials, activists, scholars, and students. And each of these guest curators writes a love letter to their chosen artwork. The letters are displayed alongside the art in MAM's Linda M. Frost Dedicated Contemporary American Indian Art Gallery, which is where Kay and I are. When you visit MAM, you will often see contemporary American Indian art on view in any of our exhibition spaces, but you will always find it in the Frost Gallery. MAM is inviting audience and community feedback insights, and interpretation to be part of the Love Letters exhibition. The audience is invited to share why you find certain pieces so powerful through a writing station, the art cart, postcards, on social media, and via emails written directly to collection objects. Ma'am will gather and display the comments throughout the run of the exhibition and add them to the exhibition's permanent record. So in the context of decolonization, the idea being that a plurality of voices is necessary to invite into the museum space to comment and give context to the artwork. So against the old ideal of there being a hierarchy of scholars who know things about the artwork, we're opening it up to the community, to everyone to comment on these artworks. So that plurality of voices is very much in keeping with Indian Education for All, which is why we wanted to invite Mike here tonight to share with us the underpinnings of that initiative and sort of look at how contemporary art can be woven in. So if you're a teacher and you are interested in teaching arts integrated curriculum, then this is a great introduction to that for you, and we hope you get some good ideas tonight. So Mike, take it away.
Hamitakiapi, Ayuha Chante Waste Nape Chuzapado. Hello, my relatives. My name is Mike Jetty, member of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation and a Turtle Mountain Chippewa descendant. And I just gave you a traditional Dakota greeting. I said, Hamitakiapi, hello, my relatives. And I greeted you all with a virtual handshake from my heart. And so my dad said, Mike, always greet people as relatives. And I asked him why. And he said, well, that way you can hit them up for cash later on. So if I see you out in the street, I might hit you up for a 5-spot or something. Glad to be here today. I work with the Office of Public Instruction with Indian Education for All. And I just thought I'd share a few things about our our state's unique constitutional obligation to teach about American Indians and some of the cool stuff that they do at the Missoula Art Museum to enhance our Indian Education for All efforts and do their own thing there, which is pretty cool. So I'm just glad to be part of the event today. And thanks for joining us. And so with that, I'm gonna throw up some slides. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, let's see if I can get this to work. All right, how's that looking?
Looks good.
Let's see if I can run it. All right, we talked about Indian Education for All, and what I really like to think of is that we're indigenizing our systems. And we're weaving Indian content throughout our accreditation standards, throughout our definition of quality education. It's in our teacher ed programs, it's in our science, math, social studies standards. And I do presentations all across the state of Montana, but I was at Carroll College this fall, and in their education classroom, they had this piece of artwork that they did using the tribal seals from the different tribes to make a map of Montana. And when I saw that, I had to take a photo, and I said, this is a great example of indigenizing our classrooms, because the kids at Carroll College see that every day when they're in those classrooms, and it just reinforces that wherever they're at in Montana, they're on someone's indigenous homeland. And I really like how you set us up, Kay, with acknowledging that traditional homeland of the Salish, and I'm here in Helena, and we're in the traditional homelands of the Blackfeet and the Salish, and the Nez Perce were in this area, and a few other tribes. So we're honored to be in their territories. So what's unique to the state of Montana is we're the only state that has it written into our state constitution will teach about American Indians. And so by being here and being part of this little webinar, you are fulfilling our state's constitutional obligation. So give yourself a pat on the back for being a good Montana citizen. And that's really cool. Yay! But here's our law, Indian Education for All. And, I work with schools all across the state of Montana to help provide them with the knowledge, the skills, and the resources so they can effectively teach about American Indians in a culturally responsive manner. And I think art, historic and contemporary art in its various forms can be an excellent way to do that. And we'll show some examples of that here in a little bit. And so feel free to, send along questions via chat if anybody has any comments, or I think we'll probably share contact info at the end of that workshop. If anybody has any questions later on, I'll be more than happy to, send you an email in response to a question you may have.
Yeah, we will share that contact info, Mike.
Excellent. One of the founding pieces of our efforts here in Montana is called our Essential Understandings Regarding Montana Indians. And about 21 years ago, we invited members of every tribe to come together, and we said, what do you want every kid in every school across the state of Montana to know about you? And this is what they came up with. The 7 essential understandings. And what's really cool about this is, since we've developed these here in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oregon, the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian, Colorado, they've all developed their own essential understandings based on our model here in Montana, which is very, very cool. You can basically break these down into 4 categories: diversity, culture, history, and sovereignty. All those tribes are very diverse. There's 12 unique tribes here in the state of Montana. They all have their own unique languages, cultures, and histories. Individual American Indians are a very diverse group of folks. There's a broad range of diversity within individual American Indians. And so always keep that in mind. So diversity, there's a huge, huge, huge amount of diversity there. I think in the United States, as of right now, there are 567 federally recognized tribes. And so think about that. That's a big number. And there's no way we can know about all those tribes, but at least we can know about the ones that live here in the state of Montana. Culture. There are songs, there are ceremonies that are thousands of years old. And, wherever you go in Montana and you see a beautiful landscape and a mountain, know that the Blackfeet or the Salish or the Pend Oreille had a name for that mountain in their own language. There are ceremonies that are thousands of years old. And I always like to point that out. Like a good example, 200 years ago here in the Helena Valley, the local tribes had a buffalo ceremony. And just this last week, they commemorated it, and they called it the bicentennial. Seeing if you're paying attention. So culture. Cultures are alive. They are being revitalized. Languages are being carried on and spoken by younger generations. So that is good to see. In history, we talk about history from Native perspectives that might conflict with stories we've heard with mainstream, and I think that is very relevant today with what's happening. Why are people tearing down statues of Christopher Columbus? Mm-hmm. Well, Columbus started the transatlantic slave trade. He did a lot of brutal, horrific things, crimes against humanity. And so perspective, I guess, who discovered who in 1492, we're still having that debate here in the year 2020. And so, perspective is a big thing. And I think art really helps us look at perspectives, and a couple of the pieces that we'll look at here in a little bit really get at that notion of whose lens are we looking at the world through. And so, that notion of history, like westward movement to the Blackfeet, it wasn't a westward movement, it was an eastern invasion. And so just flipping the script on that traditional narrative we've been taught, and just to rethink that, I guess. So to try and be more inclusive in our look at our country's history and where we're moving. It's a big thing we need to all be working on. And then sovereignty. Tribes are distinct sovereign entities. They are inherent sovereign nations. And that's really what makes tribes unique from any other cultural group in this country, is tribal nations' unique relationship with and political relationship with the federal government. And so you got diversity, culture, history, and sovereignty. And those are 4 concepts, are the basic tenets of the essential understandings regarding Montana Indians. So we think about the art in the essential understandings. It's like, this is from a document we have here at the Office of Public Instruction. We brought together Native American artists, and they put together some, themes and ideas that they wanted to share with art educators. And we talked about looking at biases and objectifying Indians. And if we think about art, I'll share some examples here in a second. So we use visual thinking strategies quite a bit in our work at OPI, and I know a lot of teachers use this method. But, you know, I'm going to throw up an image here, or several images in this slide just for brevity. But take a look at them. What's going on? What makes you say that? What more can you find? So here we go, looking at some of these images. So these are all things, you know, we think about cultural hegemony. We see these things every day in U.S. society, whether you're aware of it or not. These images are out there. You might be driving down the road and see a Winnebago RV go by, or a La Costa horse trailer, or you might go by a tobacco shop and see a wooden Indian, or, you know, be at the store and look at the Land O'Lakes butter, or beef jerky, or Legos, or cartoons like Pocahontas, or, you know, sports mascots. I think all those are good examples of just a narrow perspective on how folks are defining American Indians. And for some people, these might be the only images they see about American Indians. And these are all kind of stereotypical. That Navajo trucking one is just kind of goofy. And then Pocahontas, you know, look at that cartoon from Disney and how she's dressed. You know, she's wearing a one-strap buckskin dress. You know, how traditional is that? And so I think that's a good thing we can do is, you know, examine some of these, you know, contemporary portrayals of American Indians and kind of deconstruct the cultural hegemony that, you know, exists within them and around them. And what's the purpose of that image? And so we go back to the arts. Well, we can use culturally relevant art to help debunk some stereotypes, but look at things in a respectful manner, I guess, and really take a look at multiple traditions and look at complex styles and stuff. So I'll share a couple more slides. You know, we really want to take a look at authentic Indian art. I've seen this before. Some good, well-intentioned teachers make, you know, paper bag, you know, outfits and beaded headbands for Thanksgiving, thinking they're doing a cute little activity, but actually ending up perpetuating stereotypes, you know, unintentionally. And so I think, you know, the more we can do with inviting, you know, Native American artists into your classroom via, you know, if you can get them in person or like on the web, or getting to visit a museum like MAM virtually, I think that's a powerful way to introduce students to, you know, American Indian art. It's in our state content standards that we'll talk about artwork. And here's one, you know, looking at artistic ideas and works by American Indians. And so I'm going to do this visual thinking strategy again, but those images you saw before were from non-native artists and their ideas of what Indians are. And so I'm going to throw up some images that are created by Native people themselves. So take a minute, you know, what do you see in this image? This is the seal of the Chippewa Cree tribe. They're a sovereign nation. But those images on there, those are all powerful symbols of their culture. You know, eagle feathers, pipe, buffalo, tobacco, you know, bear tracks, the sun, you know, all those images, those are, you know, powerful representations of their culture. Here's the Fort Peck tribal seal. You know, take a look at that image. We have an excellent curriculum called Crossing Boundaries Through Art, which looks at all the different seals of the tribal nations. I really like the Fort Peck tribal seal because it shows a buffalo in the middle on a hide that's stretched out. But what's cool about their tribal seals, back in the 1980s, they had some surveying done on their reservation. And when they found out, they did these surveys, they found out the water line of a buffalo. Their website. I mean, on their tribal seal. Tribal seal. I really like this one. And something really cool happened with the Little Shell in December. They finally received federal recognition, and so they are now a federally recognized tribe. But what's cool about the Little Shell, you know, you notice something on their flag, I think. Some of you may be sitting there thinking, hey, why do they have a shamrock there? What's that French seal? Well, they are truly a good example of a multicultural group. You know, the Little Shell folks have Scottish, they have French, they have Assiniboine, Cree, Chippewa ancestry. But what's really neat is they never lost their indigenous identities. And so they're Their culture is centered around buffalo. And thinking about buffalo, do you know why you never see a buffalo hiding in a tree? Because they're really, really good at it. All right. Here's another one. This is the Fort Peck tribal seal. And, here you see a shield, feathers, arrowheads, the names of the tribes, the rays of the sun, mountains, all those things are important to those those tribes on that reservation and are part of their cultural identity. And there's meaning behind all those images. And so keep that in mind. These are symbols, but they also represent those tribes and their sovereign governments. And what I see in schools across the state of Montana is images like this. You go into classrooms, and some schools actually have tribal seals painted on their classroom walls, like on that classroom at Carroll College with that picture of the map. And so that's really indigenizing our classrooms, because every day those kids see those images, and tribal identity gets reinforced. So, but Indians, American Indians have been making art in Montana for 10,000 years. If you know where Bear Gulch is outside of Lewistown, there's over 2,000 rock art images there. It's the largest pictograph petroglyph site in North America. But most Montanans don't know it exists. But there's amazing rock art images there. And so we think about historic art, these are powerful symbols. And I'm sure the individuals that painted these 1,000 years ago or more, there's some maybe deep meanings behind this. I like the one down on the bottom. It kind of looks like a starship blasting off towards the moon, but who knows what that symbol is? It's pretty cool. There's a story behind all those images, and you can really dig deep if you want to. And so here's some of our accreditation standards. We look about contemporary portrayals of American Indians. And so I think what you guys do there at MAM, you guys do that. You include good artwork, powerful artwork by American Indians. It really makes people think. And I'm very thankful for that. And so some of the art that you're going to get to see is called ledger art. And this was done by American Indians back in the 1860s, early 1900s, but there's a contemporary ledger artists too now, and I'll share one of those in a bit. But one of the artists that's on display at MAM talks about how during oppressive times we have produced some of the most beautiful artwork, and we talk about resilience. And this ledger art gives you a glimpse into the past, and then modern ledger art gives you a glimpse into today and perspectives. But I'll share some historic ledger art with you from a Northern Cheyenne who was a prisoner in Florida when he made this artwork. And this is an image he saw when he was a younger man, and they're playing hand game. And this is actually tribes still play hand game or stick game today, all across, the Northwest and in the Midwest. And it's a big thing. If you've ever been up to the Arley powwow, they'll have big hand game tournaments, and there's songs, and there's, certain ceremonial things that might go on with hand games, but, they've been happening a long time. I like this picture that he drew. He calls it Some Fun with the Buffalo. And there's old Cheyenne oral accounts of young men trying to ride a buffalo. I really like the guy in the tree. He's like, "What are you crazy guys doing?" And then I'll share one more ledger art piece from Making Medicine here. This is showing some gambling, and they're having an arrow shooting contest. But I asked Jenny and Kay, I showed them this picture. They've seen it before, but usually when I do the visual thinking strategy with this image, the first thing that pops up is, why are they holding umbrellas? And that's something this guy saw as a young man, was folks having an arrow shooting contest, but a bunch of the Cheyenne warriors holding umbrellas. Well, to me, I think of it's kind of like, new technologies. Indian cultures weren't static. They didn't just stay in one place. When the horses came, they adapted. When metal pots and pans and guns came, the tribes adapted. And so like having those umbrellas on the plains provided you with instant shade and protection from the sun and the wind. And so it's almost like having the latest, Galaxy phone, out there on the prairie. And so, just think about that. These images that folks drew a long time ago can give us some insight into their cultures. And then so now we'll just jump into love letters. And I don't know if we want to turn it over to you, Jenny, or how's that going to work?
You can turn it back. Oh, can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah.
You can turn it back to me and I'll put up a piece of Corky's for us to talk about a little bit with those visual thinking strategies.
Sure, because the last slide I have then is my letter to Dwayne Wilcox's.
Oh, okay. Maybe when we're ready for you to read that, I'll put up the image, Dwayne's piece, and you can read your letter.
Sounds good.
How does that sound?
So I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Okay.
Was that okay? That makes sense?
That was awesome. Yeah. And everyone who's listening, if you want to put any questions for Mike into the Q&A box, he just gave us such great information. There's so many questions. I'm sure people want to know more about various parts of what you just said, Mike. So feel free to go ahead and put those in the Q&A and we can get them to Mike. So I wanted to introduce this piece, which is called Split War Shield. And I'm really glad you showed those tribal seals, Mike, because I feel like the whole seal shield circular artwork pattern is really interesting. And I wonder if we could just start by maybe talking a little bit about this piece and a little bit about Corky and the artist who made this. And then maybe you could read the love letter. Mike wrote 2 love letters. He only had to write 1, but he wrote 2. So he was like overachieving in the love letter department, which is awesome. But tell us a little bit about this piece, or do you want to sort of unpack what we see when we look at it first?
Let's just kind of unpack what we see. We'll do a little visual thinking strategy between you and me. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I mean, to me, the first thing that I notice is the circular shape, and then the sort of, it seems like it's made out of tires around the edges. And when I first saw this piece, I didn't know what a war shield was. I had to do some research on that. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit. But there's the circle with the tires, but then there's that division, like that jagged lightning bolt down the middle kind of piece.
Yeah, and that really struck out at me when I first saw this image. It was all the, little pieces of tire tread. Like, what is that? Because, like you talk about war shields and symbols, and I've been so used to seeing like, a circle with maybe some symbols painted on it, or a hand, or a horse, or a buffalo, or something. And then, maybe some feathers hanging down on it, as part of a tribal seal. But when I saw this, it really made me step back and think for a second. It's like, what's in here? And then once you look a little closer, you can kind of see some of the, I think, images Corky was trying to, portray, or, some of the ideas he was trying to get through with this image. So,
yeah, I definitely see the red hand right away. And some in the middle, I see some kind of like tire tracks, like if something drove over the land. And then the feathers, it's hard to see here, but if you look really closely, the feathers have some trucks and bulldozers and images of like earth movers on them.
That red hand reminds me of a joke.
Let's hear it.
When you go up to a street light and you're at the crosswalk, and there's a little sign there that kind of does a little dig towards Indian people. Every time you go to that sign and you're waiting to go, there's little, when the white man shows up, you got to move.
It's been a while since I was at a crosswalk. I'm trying to remember what they look like.
The Indians are saying stop, but then when the white guy shows up,
Oh, right, because the stop hand is red and the walking person is white. That's interesting. Well, also
next time you're at a crosswalk, think about that bad joke there. So.
Yeah, I remember all the bad jokes. But the red hand also is a symbol that's been used in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement. Is that a traditional symbol, or does it just happen to be here and there also?
But did you notice on that rock art piece I shared from
Yeah.
the Gulch? couple thousand years ago, someone was making that symbol there that meant something to them.
Yeah.
And so, it could mean different things to different people, but like today, folks are using that symbol for, a very serious issue going on in Indian country today.
Yeah. It also seems like to me to almost say like, we're here, like we're marking this spot, in some kind of intentional way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to share a little bit about Corky as an artist, but also a little bit more about the background of this piece. And I guess I'll just let our viewers know that Corwin Claremont, or Corky Claremont, is a celebrated contemporary artist from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And he's has several pieces in the MAM collection. He's a printmaker, a conceptual and installation artist. He seeks to explore situations that affect Indian country historically and in contemporary times. And when I first encountered Corky's work, I was teaching at Flathead Valley Community College, and I was looking for American Indian art to show to my students. So when I found this piece, I really loved the educational aspect behind it too, how it was really talking about sovereignty and environmentalism and issues that I've come to learn are very important to Corky. So I don't know, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jenny, and on that video clip, Corky talks about this art piece too.
Yeah, and we're going to share with you all at the end of the webinar, there's going to be several links, and one of them is the video that Mike's talking about with Corky explaining this piece further. So be sure to go ahead and copy that link out of, and I just realized it's a clickable link, so they won't be able to copy it. So you won't be able to copy the link, but if that gives you a real incentive to fill out the evaluation, because I can promise if you return the evaluation to us, we will get you that link. Sorry, we're all learning how to make webinars here, and it's kind of a steep learning curve for some of us.
Yeah, well, my daughter, she's just finished her sophomore year of school. And, she was telling me the other day, she said, Dad, you know how we got one generation called the boomers? I'm like, yeah. She said, our generation's going to be known as the Zoomers.
Well,
we're all learning here as we go along. So.
We're all Zooming now. Yeah, so I don't know, Mike, do you want to give a little bit of the background of what this was behind this piece about the highway and up through the Flathead Reservation?
Sure. Corky in this art, he was talking about, they're wanting to build a, bigger highway through the reservation. And I think they have in some places, like what they did over in Arlee and stuff. But that road, disrupting, wildlife patterns, taking out riparian places. And, so it's just how it split, things in half and, split Warshield and that line going through the middle. But I think it's symbolic of a lot of things. It's like the roads that we, build between us and divide us and stuff. I think there's some of that can be taken with this. But something that's really cool that the tribe did up there, though, if you've driven on Highway 93, is they have those overpasses for animals. And man, if we could do more of that, because we're the invasive species here. And how can we better coexist with our animals that we coexist with, I guess. Way up there, that's a good example of someone trying to be culturally responsive to everything else in their environment, whether it be bears or deer, other animals that cross over that highway. So
yeah, for those of you who would like to see pictures of that, there is an OPI has a curriculum, and I think MAM and OPI collaborated on a curriculum around this piece, and there are images of the animal bridge in that curriculum. And so we can send out those links also if folks want to find that. And one thing I noticed, and I commute on that highway right through the reservation. I used to do it once a week. Now I do it once a month. And so I really have felt this piece, like at driving that road and noticing that division and noticing the animal bridge. And as I was researching this piece for the class that I was teaching, I learned that the war shield is actually a defensive armament, or I don't know what you would call that, but it's not to start a war. It's to defend against invasion. And so that just made it mean even more to me, because it's like, no one's starting an argument here. It's like, we're just trying to hold it together and not have this division come through the land.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a very emotional piece to me. A lot of Corky's work is because last year when in 2018, he had an exhibition called Tar Sands at MAM, and that was another environmental impact exhibition that was really powerful. So, oh, okay, so I was gonna let Mike read his love letter to this piece. So Mike, if you would read your love letter, and while Mike's reading, I invite all of our participants to make some notes, and maybe you want to email your own love letter. I'll show you how when Mike's done reading. And sorry, go ahead.
Is mine up on the next slide?
I think it's on the previous slide. I can go back to it.
Sure.
There we go.
You want me to read this out loud?
I do.
All right. Ode to Split War Shield. When I first saw the piece, said, not too many res cars have that kind of spare. Reflective. Maybe it's not a spare, but someone's art to share. Introspective. Split down the middle, just like so many natives navigating two worlds. Contemplative. Roads we build can divide us, but it's the bridges we make that bind us. Said, kind of reminds me of the old song by Keith Secola, Indian Car, and here, the art is the star.
Nice.
And I threw in an old song called Indian Car in there. That's a classic tune. So
Yeah.
if you go in there, Google Indian Car, Keith Secola, it'll come up. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and it's beyond my technological abilities to make it play right now. I might disrupt the whole thing might blow up if I try to do that. But we will add that link as well, and you can Google it too. So thank you for that, Mike. That was awesome. And I'm going to show you all now how to email your letter, into the Split War Shield. So you can keep writing your letter for a moment while I get the other screen ready for you to see where to share it. So our Love Letters curriculum is all online. It's on Teachable, and you can Google Missoula Art Museum Teachable. You can see it right up here. And we're going to have multiple courses here, but in the Love Letters course, what you'll see is a lot of, down the side, you'll see each artist, each artwork. So we began with Jean Quick to C. Smith, Lillian Pitt, Donna Luce, Rick Bartow, Kevin Redstar. These are all works from the MAM collection that our different guest curators, our guest selectors have chosen and then have written love letters to. So here's Corky's piece, Split War Shield. And you see here Cameron Decker from Salish Kootenai College wrote to the Split War Shield. Here's Cameron's letter. And then there's a bit about Cameron. And here's the email address, flatlander@missoulaartmuseum.org. So each artwork has its own email address. So to get all these little goodies, the videos, the links to the curriculum, and your PIR credit if you're a teacher, go ahead and email your letter to flatlander@missoulaartmuseum.org, and we'll reply to you with all of those links. And if you want to write to other artworks in the exhibition, you can just go to MissoulaArtMuseumTeachable.com and sign up for a free account. And you're welcome to share this with any students or any other people that you might be working with and want to do that together. So this is back to that idea that we started with of the plurality of voices and trying to decolonize this museum so that we are not only listening to the quote unquote experts, but are listening to all the people who might have something to say about these pieces. So I'm going to stop sharing the Teachable site, go back to, go back to our PowerPoint. And we're a green museum, so I don't know if you guys saw that, but Kay just had to get up and move around because the lights went out. All right, so what you see up here next is when Mike was invited to be a selector, we offered him all the works in the collection. We have more than 200 works of contemporary American Indian art. And by now you've kind of gotten to know Mike a little bit. And so it won't surprise you that he chose Dwayne Wilcox and a piece of contemporary ledger art. So should we do a little, we have time to do a little VTS with this piece also, Mike.
Yeah, let's do it. So what are you seeing here, Jenny?
I'm already seeing kind of like two groups of people looking at each other. And one thing I noticed right away is that their faces don't have any expressions on them. So we kind of have to figure out what's going on by what they're doing with their bodies. And
Yeah.
I also want to jump in and just say, for teachers who are watching, even if arts integration is new to you, even if Indian education is new to you, even if contemporary art is new to you, anybody can sit down with a piece of art and do what Mike and I are doing right now. All it requires is just to slow yourself down, look at the piece, name the things you're seeing, and just give yourself a moment before you jump to interpretation. Just give yourself a moment just to look. So what did you notice when you first picked this piece, Mike?
Who's taking pictures of who?
Ah.
You know, maybe these folks are, showing up at a powwow or whatever, or maybe these three guys here are just going to a, farmer's market in Missoula, and this is someone they're taking a picture of. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And so it's just, who's looking at who, I guess. And so you hear about, full bloods and mixed bloods and, identity. And I think that's when I looked at this piece, it gets to identity and perspective.
Yeah.
We think about this notion of full-blooded Indian people, this thing called blood quantum. And, it's an interesting issue, blood quantum. Like most tribes have membership requirements, and you have to be a certain degree of, Indian blood to be a tribal member. Some tribes don't use blood quantum. They go back to tribal roles, and then you could be 1/16 and still be a tribal member if you can trace your lineage back there. But most tribes in Montana, I think it's at least a 1/4 degree, Indian blood to be native. But, this notion, it was something that was imposed on Native people. But then we've all bought into it as Native people, this notion of blood quantum. Like the last time I was at the doctor and I had to give blood, I told him, I was like, don't take too much. I don't want to get disenrolled. One day somebody said, Mike, are you a full blood? And I said, no, I'm a few quarts shy.
I like that. I like the way you bring in the flipping perspective idea, because that's something that really ties Indian education and contemporary art together, because we talk about that all the time, that contemporary art is the art of our time. So it's made by mostly living artists about the ideas and issues of our time. And a lot of the art really does require you to flip your perspective. And being able to flip your perspective is such an important skill for just navigating the world. So why not practice that with art and with Indian education for all?
Yeah, and with this piece too, I don't want to discourage people from going to a powwow and not taking pictures or at some cultural fair, or but just to be respectful. And if you do take photos, make sure it's okay to do so, or check with people first, that kind of thing. But I don't want to discourage folks not to take pictures with this, but I think it's just an interesting image when you take a look at it and what's happening. So.
Yeah, it really is. It really does flip the narrative, because another thing that we throughout art history talk about a lot and think about a lot is that what you touched on at the beginning, the authenticity of art. Who is making the art and who is the art about, and what happens when people start making art about cultures that are not theirs. And, you know, what is that authenticity, that appropriation? Where are those lines? And where they've been over history and where they are now is changing.
Yeah, like that one slide I showed you at the beginning with those different images, you know, that
Yeah.
Legos and, you know, Pocahontas and stuff.
Mhm.
I have tons of those kinds of stereotypical images that, you know, are from, you know, old movies or, you know, cartoons or comics or, you know, and so just how prevalent they were in our society and how that shaped people's thinking, that cultural hegemony.
Absolutely.
Kind of like unpacking an invisible knapsack. There's these more layers there.
Yes, and it's even with everything that's going on right now, with the social and cultural revolutions that are happening right now. I think more and more people are becoming aware of the microaggressions involved in those kinds of images and how they are cumulative over time.
Yeah, like microaggression, a good example of sports mascots.
Yeah.
A lot of well-intentioned folks just having a good time at a football game, dressing up as Indians or, you know, doing a tomahawk chop.
Yeah.
Might not think they're being offensive at all, but, you know, they actually are. And so,
Yeah, and that perspective flip can help educate people to those microaggressions. So, Mike, we do have a question in the Q&A. Someone wants to know, where can we get the tribal seals or a poster with all of them for their classroom? Is it possible to get the one from Carroll College?
that was just one they did as just a big art piece on their wall. But if you want those seals are on our tribal on our OPI website, and you can just download files. But we don't have you know, big posters of those. You just have to print them off. But they're good high resolution images, and we have a teaching guide that goes along with those seals. I know a lot of schools have hung up tribal flags in their classrooms, and so that's something to consider, I guess, you know, that you can actually purchase a flag from a tribe, hang that up. I know several schools have done that, but you know, those tribal seals are all available on our OPI website with descriptions of what every symbol means on that image.
Yeah, and if you get a chance, if you're a teacher and you get a chance to be at a conference in Montana where Mike is giving these workshops, I first encountered the tribal seals in the workshop, and it's a really wonderful way to get to know the tribes and what's important in their culture and how that art was made. So, yeah.
And then you can always connect it back to that student's own personal identity. They can make their own individual seal of what's important to them.
Yeah,
so it's cool.
Great. Well, I want to. We're right on time, but I want to go ahead and let you read your love letter to Dwayne Wilcox.
Okay.
So I'm going to put it up on the next screen.
All right. Ode to wow, full-blooded white people. Flip the script, perspective, identity, power, and privilege. What does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be Indian? Is there such a thing as a full blood? Did you hear the one about the white guy wearing a beaded necklace inlaid with 5 vintage Indian head nickels? When asked, said, "I'm trying to be a quarter Indian." Blood quantum, remnants of a colonial mindset, still unpacking the hegemonic threat. Decolonization, indigenization, revitalization. Healing takes place in our own sacred place. This artwork hits you where it counts, in the heart and in the head, and even makes you laugh out loud.
That was amazing. And for teachers who are watching, I want to point out, you know, Mike looked at this image. I mean, he chose this image, which I think is important in terms of curriculum and teaching with Indian education and with contemporary art. I do think it's important, and Mike, I'd love to hear what you think about this, to give kids a choice. Like, say you were going to do a VTS or an inquiry-based looking at some art, and then the kids were going to maybe write a poem or a love letter, which teachers, the curriculum's all there for you on the Teachable site. You can access it, you can use it. But having your students be able to make a choice about the piece that they want to write to, you know, as opposed to like assigning the same piece to everybody. I mean, Mike chose this piece. He has a great sense of humor. and this piece spoke to him. If I had asked him to write to a piece that was, you know, different than this, it might not have resonated.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny when I first saw the piece. That's why I chose it.
But then I guess I just proved my point wrong, because you also wrote an amazing ode to Corky's War Shield, which was not funny, or, you know, not as funny. So maybe they could write to any piece. I'm not sure. But teachers, don't be afraid to jump in, get some contemporary art. You can get it from MAM, you can get it from OPI, you can get it from the teachable curriculum, and just have your students maybe use it as a writing prompt and see what happens.
Yeah, get you thinking about stuff regarding perspective. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about perspective. Did you hear about the snail that got mugged by 2 turtles?
No.
Yeah, the police were talking to the snail, and they said, ask him to describe it, and he said, I can't. It all happened so fast.
Those turtles. Before we start to close out, I just want to see if there are any other questions coming in from the chat for you, Mike. And I have a question. Let's see. My question is, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to teachers who might feel some anxiety or apprehension of teaching Indian education for all, and how to sort of get past that fear and take the, you know, be brave, like people who are afraid of doing it wrong or being accidentally offensive. How can you speak to them a little bit?
Sure. You know, I guess something to consider is, you know, find your own comfort level first. You know, find some place in your curriculum where you think you can weave it in a seamless way. Like the 4th Friday in September in Montana is American Indian Heritage Day. And maybe use that day as a way to, you know, start thinking about weaving Indian Ed for All into your curriculum. You know, it could be a standalone lesson, or maybe it's a unit you do. Could be some artwork you incorporate, you know, throughout the year, or maybe in just current events. But know that if you go to the OPI Indian Education site, that we have lesson plans and materials available there. If you go to MAM website, they have resources available on their, you know, site there that are culturally relevant. And so Montana Historical Society's got some great curriculum. And so just know there's some accurate, authentic resources that have been developed for you, you know, in conjunction with tribal partners and with teachers. So it is, you know, user-friendly in the classroom. And, you know, if you have a great idea, something you've done in the classroom for Indian Ed for All that works great, let us know. And we can share that with other folks. But, you know, I guess, you know, don't be afraid, you know, just try it out. You know, it's a learning process, just like these Zoom meetings are. We'll make mistakes, but we just keep moving forward. But I think you know, just go back to your standards too. It's embedded in our standards, like that art standard. It's in our math standards. It's in our science standards. And so there's ways you can weave that in a seamless manner, I think. And so,
Yeah.
if you have a question, just reach out and we'll try and help you.
Yeah, Mike's really responsive if you have questions to help. And there's also a couple of courses on the Learning Hub. If you're brand new, when I was new to Montana, I took an Indian education class, and it was really helpful in terms of understanding what I didn't know and knowing where my gaps in my knowledge were. So the Learning Hub courses are free and anybody can take them. You don't have to be a teacher. You can be a parent. Is that right, Mike? And take them?
Yeah.
And so, especially as we're going through the pandemic, and if you're at home and you're homeschooling your kids, and you want some more knowledge and some more resources, those are great, as is the Smithsonian 360 that Mike mentioned.
Speaking of that, we put together quite a few lesson plans that are directed right to students.
Yeah.
And so it's like the students, we put a lesson on tribal seals. We had one developed on the pandemic with the crows in the early 1800s, tying it in today's pandemic. And so we're really trying to adapt our lessons to fit the current situation happening right now in our country. So
Yeah, I think that's so smart as we're all learning about the virtual classroom and the virtual learning to speak directly to students is really impactful. I want to sort of close us out with a quote from Corky Claremont, who created the split war shield behind us. I just found this really resonant today. Just thinking about the pandemic and why we need contemporary art and Indian education. And Corky says, "My passion is visual arts, and in particular that of contemporary art and art education. As an Indian artist, I've directed much of my effort toward expressing important aspects of our Indian community through contemporary art. It's my belief that to exhibit contemporary American Indian art is an important acknowledgement of a culture and a people that are very much alive today." And so I wanted to sort of draw that line that, you know, it's contemporary American Indian art. We're not talking about artifacts here. I mean, some of the ledger art is artifact, but the art that's being made today by American Indian artists can just showing that artwork in your classroom can just have such an impact, such a multi-layered impact.
Yeah, that's why I like how you incorporated the pieces of us jamming out on those guitars. Because that was some Native American art exhibit and had all kinds of stuff in there. Buffalo World guitars, you know, media in the background. Yeah. So, you know, it's like it's not just putting Indian art into a box. It's like it's this huge array of things, of diversity. So
yes, and the music especially. I mean, that was John Hitchcock, his exhibition at MAM last year, and that one incorporated a lot of music, oral histories and music from his family, and then his own band came and performed with the guitars. And then, in fact, when we were setting up the Love Letters curriculum, Mike, you and I had a conversation, and I was saying, you know, I had an idea of what a love letter was, but I figured there might be other ideas, especially in American Indian culture, like what does a love letter look like there? And you introduced us to the idea of the 49 songs. And then after that, one of our contributing selectors actually did put in a piece of music. She wrote a poem and then put a piece of music behind it. So I was really happy that we're able to get the oral parts into the exhibition.
That's cool.
So thank you for that. Well, we've got just a few minutes left, and Kay is going to give us a little wrap up. But Mike, thanks for coming on Zoom tonight, and it was fun as always to see you. I'm sorry we don't have guitars tonight.
Can I leave you with one last little comment here?
You bet.
Absolutely.
You know, when I was growing up, my dad told me, he said, "Mike, you should never criticize someone until you've walked a mile in their moccasins." And I asked my dad why. And he said, "Well, that way you can be a mile away, plus you got their moccasins."
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for taking time out of your evening to be with us tonight and all of your expertise and knowledge. It's really great to have you. And thanks to everybody who joined us tonight. I just wanted to add that MAM is now open to the public, and we're leading tours at 10 and 3 almost every day. It's Tuesday through Fridays. And we do ask that you call and reserve, and we're trying to limit, in COVID style, we're trying to limit the group to under 9 people. And yeah, we have masks available here at the museum if you want to come visit and see Corky's piece firsthand and the entire Love Letters show. So thanks again, and we hope to see you back at the museum. So I also will tell you that we have at noon on Tuesdays, once a week, we have a free course that's being taught here. We're going to have it virtually as well as in person here at MAM. It's called Embodiment. And I'd love you to check out our website and learn a little bit more about that, but you're welcome to come and join us for that. And then also we have free of charge, of course, as well. We have Lunch Club that's offered to businesses and organizations. We do ask you to sign up your businesses or organizations in advance. It's at once a month on typically the 3rd Wednesday of each month, but we're going to be doing them outside in the art park all summer long. And the art park, if you haven't seen the large-scale sculptures yet by Blackfeet artist Jay Labor, they're remarkable and incredibly inspiring. And I encourage you to come walk through the art park in the evening, during the day. And if you want to learn more, you can sign up with your organization or business for a lunch club.
Great, thanks for filling that space, partner.
Yep.
And so now we do have the last screen here. So if you would be so kind to give us your feedback on this webinar, and you can skip the part where it says Jenny needs to learn how to use the webinar because we got that. But here are a few questions. You could just write these into an email to info@missoulaartmuseum.org, and that will give us your feedback. So I've given you a couple ways to reach us that way, or through the Teachable curriculum if you want to write to the love letter to the artwork. Here's Mike's contact info here, and mine and Kay's. And if you would like to get PIR credit for this workshop, what we do require is a love letter. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be serious, as you've learned tonight. It can be whatever you like, and just send it to the email address, and we will send you back the certificate for the PIR credit and all of these links that we mentioned tonight, the video of Corky, all the OPI links, and the curriculum links. So thank you all for coming on tonight. We really appreciate it. And if you're looking at this in the future, we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Mike, for being here with us. Looking forward to next time. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks
for
again.
coming.
Bye.
Have a good night.
You too.
You too, Mike. Thank you.
See you next time.
Okay.
Bye.